This episode is brought to you by RLD Group, on a mission to reboot leadership drive, eradicate burnout in tech, and help transform technical experts lacking people leadership skills from being a company's biggest liability into their greatest asset. On this episode of Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Dury.
There's the power in owning your answer to the question and speaking your truth, right? And then being yourself. So imagine a world where you share everything you have to say and you actually bring the value forward that your voice can. Bring in your voice. And if someone says, what's one song and you got 3, give them 3.
Leaders in tech are burning out at an absurd rate. Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Dury is a no BS conversation with a female executive who spent over 25 years in Silicon Valley. If you're suffering from the always on, never good enough, we'll replace you today machine called the tech space. This show will help you reboot your leadership drive. Here's Lisa.
Okay, here's my question for the day. Burnout. Is it easier to quit or stay? I have faced that question myself. You all know my story, but do you feel like quitting when you're in burnout? Yes. And are people leaving? Absolutely. And I'm so excited for the person who's with us today to answer this question for us as well, because she's seeing amazing human resource leaders just quit and not stay. And I have to tell you, that is not okay. Coming from HR background myself, knowing the value and importance that human resources professionals bring to the organization, whether you're in HR or you have an HR partner, whether you left or you're thinking of going back, this episode's for you, because we're going to double click today with Susan Nelson, the HR leaders coach, about what matters right now and how HR leaders can thrive and actually make their way all the way up, to the C-suite rather than burning out, flaming out, or just giving up. Susan, I'm so excited you're here. This is so important.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here, Lisa.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So good, right?
It's such an area that's so near and dear to my heart. So I'm really pleased to be able to share this message with all of your listeners. Thank you.
Listen, for those of you that have been with us for a while, this is not Susan's first time on Control-Alt-Delete. The reason she's here today is because what she's doing right now, it's just something that I know is so essential. I had to have her back. So we work together. Sometimes we support clients through RLD Group. Sometimes she supports clients through her own business. And what I can tell you is every time I talk to Susan, I learn something. And every time I have a conversation with Susan, I leave lighter and brighter. She has a way to talk about really tough stuff and then still with that smile on her face and that warmth in her heart, connect it for you. So I want to make sure that whether you're an HR professional listening in or you're in tech, this episode's for you. I'm going to do the pull-throughs because she and I have been talking about how much similarity there is for leaders in tech and human resource professionals. And it's a conversation that needs to be had. Let's just jump right in. Let me give you the official intro for Susan. She's an integrative leadership coach who shows emerging HR leaders and those new to the C-suite how to increase their impact, confidence, and results so they can thrive at work and home. So I'm going to repeat that, everybody. I want you to hear me. How to increase their impact, confidence, and results so they can thrive at work and at home. Raise your hand if you want that, right? Of course you do. All right. And so Susan has developed her signature system for coaching HR leaders to stay in the game by reclaiming their power at work and at home, elevating their leadership role and function in their organization, and making it okay for them to bring their whole self to work. So let me just say again, this episode is for anyone listening, and we're going to pull and tie it through the HR lens because, well, it's my podcast and I know how important it is. And at the same time, I know that everybody can benefit. So Susan, would you start by just telling us a little bit about your own story as an HR leader in tech, right? And what that was like and what brought you here now? Take us on the journey.
So I started my career about, over 20 years ago now. I won't date myself, and I've worked in tech my entire career in HR and kind of went through, worked my way up into different roles. And about 10 years ago, I had my own burnout experience and really had just started a new family and really was struggling with how to give enough to my role at work and do the work in a way that was authentic to me, but also, meeting the needs of the business, which was pretty demanding. in tech and being able to have a life outside of work and being present for my family too. And so I was having a really tough time managing that. And I decided to step out and start my own, initially part-time, coaching and consulting practice. And I noticed that there were burnt out women leaders across Silicon Valley. I wasn't the only one, and a lot were leaving the workforce, and particularly around that time of starting a family. And, for me, it was mid-career. Really, the strain of continuing to climb the corporate ladder while having a family was really tough. So while I know many people in the field, whether it's HR or not, but leaders and executives, they struggle with this challenge. I know many who've struggled with this challenge, but HR leaders in particular, I feel like their role is often misunderstood. And in particular, HR leaders are often misunderstood and underappreciated for what they do. And they feel like second-class citizens in the C-suite. And so then for them, they do this sort of mental mind balance of, is it worth it? Is what I'm giving up worth how I'm being treated and, underappreciated in the C-suite? And a lot of them say, it's not worth it. So then they leave. So that's where I've really seen, a lot of great people leaving tech and non-tech roles, but HR leaders in particular. And I feel like it's such a shame. And it really is a disservice to organizations, because if you don't have great HR leadership helping to lead the way, what are you left with? So it's an area that means a lot to me.
I'm compelled to call out how your voice changed from the start to the end, right? It's almost like you relived the experience as you're talking about it. And I could feel just through Zoom, I could feel how important it is to you and how imperative it is. And the thing that what I'm super curious about, to close the loop for folks, because I know your story. Susan and I started knowing each other back in college, right? We've known each other a very long time. And we've both had our journeys of, becoming, getting married, having a kid or two, building a business, right? So we've gone through a lot parallel. And I think both of us, I'll just speak for me, we went into HR because we wanted to make a difference. Right? We went into HR because we care about people and we understand organizational strategy, and that the human element, the people doing the work matter. And when I heard you talk, I felt this, just a sincere appreciation and a true empathetic space that you were holding for everybody who's suffering and facing this dilemma, which is giving everything I have good enough and worth it. And what's the cost of not being present outside of work, right? If it's only about work, it's kind of like, what are they going to write on your tombstone, right? And so I think you have some wonderful tips here to share around what does it mean to really bring your whole self to work. And you don't have to go start businesses like we did. You can stay inside, and we both have been inside and we know what that's like too. So I want to make sure that I want to help people identify with what's really going on. So can you just tell me the biggest challenge right now facing HR leaders? Like when you look at all the different folks that you're coaching and the engagements that you have, and of course, obviously your circle of friends, because when you're in HR, you make lifelong HR friends. What's the biggest challenge facing HR leaders today?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I feel like a lot of the folks that I talk to, HR, we're very mired down in the business and what's going on in front of us, right? So there's a lot in the last 20 months that has been going on. And so a lot of HR leaders might answer that question saying, oh, well, we're dealing with the great resignation right now. And so hiring is super difficult, or we're losing people left and right, or dealing with COVID and managing through that, or even as employers return to, well, I shouldn't say return to work because that's a misnomer, but as employers start opening doors for people to come back to the office, the challenges of hybrid work or working remotely and how to manage that. And yes, all of those things are very important challenges, but I would like your listeners to consider something entirely different, which is, I think there's this unspoken brush under the carpet, an issue quietly crushing HR leaders right now. And that's this phenomenon of women HR leaders and emerging leaders who are leaving altogether before they even get to the C-suite. And I feel like that is, the ever increasing demands of this role right now, with little to no support, and HR leaders expected to kind of know what to do around everything. It is crushing. HR leaders are burning out and often don't realize it till it's way too late. They are having physical manifestations. It wasn't one of my clients, but I read a thread the other day of a woman who literally couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. And it is going on a leave of absence, a medical leave of absence, because her body shut down. And so HR has always been the supporters for employees, right? And so who's supporting the supporters? And I think if we keep going on as is, we're going to lose a whole lot more HR leaders to burnout and career change. And how does that bode for the rest of our organizations, right? Who's going to do all the hiring that does need to get done? Who's going to manage, these many issues? So I feel like shining a light on this, we really need to look at this because it's a problem that I think isn't being addressed. And certainly HR leaders aren't necessarily thinking about it directly themselves because we always put ourselves last. I mean, that's kind of our MO.
I want to join you on this for a second. So I have the privilege of working with an HR leadership team, CHRO and her directs at one of the tech companies in the Bay Area. And I brought to them, I was doing some strengths work, right? Really, because they're a new team, bringing them together virtually. And I brought some content to them that we have, which I know you know about, is awakening conscious leadership, right? And so many times I just talk about it from a stress management or self-doubt lens. Because a lot of people are like, awakening conscious leadership, right? That sounds very woo-woo. Well, honestly, it's not. It's stress management and, self-doubt management, right? And we were in the session and we just did like a 15-minute mindfulness exercise as part of the session. And I watched them all. It felt like there was a collective exhale of this HR team. So we kept going. And then the CHRO stopped me and said, hey, hold on. Whatever that just was, we need more of that. That my team is drowning. We are doing everything, rolling out programs, making sure skip tracing is happening, hybrid versus not hybrid. Do we change people's pay or not because they're in a different zip code now? What happens when you get a quarantine? Sales kick off. I mean, they were just so I just want to say to you that, through my own lens, working with our clients too, this CHRO stopped and said, we count too. And we need to do something about it. And it was so inspiring to me because so many times that we count two part doesn't get talked about. And it's just keep on going more, execute. Just keep everybody. It's like paddling underwater and trying to move the Queen Mary or something.
And hats off to that CHRO to have that presence of mind to think of her team that way. Because I know a lot of HR leaders feel the pressure to prove themselves to their peers and their CEO. And it's like, what have you done for me lately? Oh, well, we've done all these programs and never mind the team's burnt out. But for that leader to recognize what her team needs and to stop long enough to actually do an exercise like that, that's amazing, right? And I think it's unfortunately, the more of the exception right now.
That's why I was so inspired. 100%. I thought, I love this team. Like we have a leader here in HR who's honestly saying, you know what matters most right now is 3 deep breaths, right? And let's reprioritize.
Exactly. Yeah.
3 deep breaths, right? Yep. I mean, it was amazing. I thought to myself, oh, Susan's coming on. I can't wait till we can talk about this because everybody needs this, right? Yeah. And I'll say this too. So even while we're talking about our family members in HR, right? Because, I'm an HR professional as well. When I think about if HR can step into that, find their voice and own it, which is what you help them do, I think the organizations will be better for it too. So it's
absolutely
it's this oxygen mask thing that we always talk about. But when your HR professional is not burnt out, imagine what is possible. How much more innovation, creativity, programs that really meet your needs instead of, everyone just barely hanging on. Yeah.
It's not even just getting to the burnout. And burnout is like sort of the final stage. Yeah. But, how are HR leaders who are on that path, maybe they're showing up irritable. Maybe, whether it's at work or at home. I know for me, it wasn't at work. I held it together at work. But when I got home, I unleashed on my family and it was not pretty. Yep. And so you have to think about those other implications too of relationships that are maybe eroding as a result of the stress.
Yeah. So let's stay with implications for a minute because listen, I'm not shy about talking about burnout and its impact on productivity. It's a $1 trillion problem in the US alone. When you think about healthcare costs, medical leaves, mistakes, rework, right? Open recs not being filled. What are the implications that you see from the standpoint of from a business, at the business level, the personal level, and even the community, right? Because we all are parts of communities. Talk to me about some implications.
Yeah, I think right now in particular, what is needed from leaders in general. It's more, the emphasis now is much more on things like authenticity, empathy, vulnerability, right? Because we need to create a environment for people to feel like they want to be a part of that. And there's so much going on in individual employees, in the backgrounds at home and in life right now that really does carry over to the workplace. And so if you want to hire and retain the top talent, you're going to need to have more leaders who demonstrate that, right? And who better than an HR leader who is able to bring her whole self to work, right? Confidently leading her team and organization through very challenging times with courage and compassion and heart, right? And bringing heart to work. Because I know I've been there, HR leaders who are stressed may not always, the human in human resources doesn't always show up. And so how do we get out of this mode of polished perfection and glorified overwork, right? That's got to be a thing of the past, right? We've got to have more, as you say, conscious leadership who get it, who can really create these environments where people are going to thrive in organizations. And I want to create this movement of helping more women and successfully grow their careers into senior HR roles, right? Without sacrificing having a life outside of work and their own well-being. Because I think by doing that, they not only help themselves, but they serve as a great role model for their organizations across all business functions, right? It doesn't have to be just HR. And so my hope is that more women we'll keep more women, exceptional women in our field, right? Because frankly, there are times when I've thought about, gosh, I shouldn't have left myself, right? And should I have stayed in longer? And I do. There are aspects of the corporate life that I absolutely do miss. And I think who knows where I could have gone with my career. But I made this choice to build a business of my own. And certainly, I'm not saying everybody should do that because it's you've got to be a certain type of individual to do that. But it's my hope to keep more exceptional women in this field of HR who will help create more inclusive workplaces that more employees want to be a part of. And I think we talked about this before. Who wants to work in an organization where you feel like you have to be always on or a cog in the wheel or one-dimensional and just burnt out, right? It's not what we desire. And that's not why we went into HR to begin with, right? We wanted to help people.
I remember going into HR myself and my father was like, don't do it. They're not respected. You're never going to have an impact. Oh my gosh, Lisa, you're going to waste your career. I mean, he was like up my ass about don't do it. Right. And being the daughter that I am, I was like, thank you for your input. Right. I'm on a mission. And, this is who I am as a person. But I'll never forget. I was going to like a Northern California HR something. I don't remember what it was. And I met the woman, the CHRO at the time at the company my dad worked at. And I went up and I was like, hey, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you. My dad works at blah, blah. And, anyway, she's like, oh my gosh. She literally had that look like, And I said, I could tell you're a fan. And she's like, well, he is definitely not a fan of mine. He is definitely in my face about the value we bring and what we do. And I was fascinated by it. And I remember going home and saying, oh my gosh, Dad, guess who I met today? And he was like, oh, this is why I'm telling you, right? Don't go. Well, what he didn't realize was this woman and I actually really resonated and we started talking about it. So what really happened was he started to see the value in HR through my lens because he had such mindset already made up and all the history, like he couldn't see what she was trying to do. He just showed up with and he'll admit this, by the way, I'm not like talking for him. And I remember graduating and, going out into my HR career and he was like, kid, I'm so glad you don't listen to me. Right. Like I'm clear enough that it really matters to you because listen, it's not just about, benefits and comp. Like HR is, organizational strategy. It's about helping you really run your business in the business of humans. Now, I'm not saying there aren't policies and processes you got to put together, but when you're a human resource professional, you actually get trained and educated into how to make a high-performing team and an organization. And it gets missed so many times because of the mindset, which my dad was very typical of, which is, oh yeah, just phone it in. It's HR. They're like the police. So I think I'm just sharing that because I really think that there's so much more value there in the HR function than is even allowed. And I think that part of that has to do with being burnt out and not figuring out how to influence and really drive change because you're in the midst of the labels and the beliefs around what this function is and why it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think I wholeheartedly agree. And good for you for standing your ground and educating, because I think there's so much of what we do that is misunderstood, not appreciated, because maybe they've never seen a great HR leader at work, or they've seen just the tactical operational side of things, which I don't want to diminish that, because there's definitely a lot of work and effort that goes into running an HR operations. But as a senior HR leader, there are many other things that we're tasked to do. And a lot of it is educating. I remember, every organization I ever started at, I literally sat down with the executives that I was working closely with, and I had a one-to-one conversation around what it is that I did and didn't do, and the value of how they can leverage me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not having those conversations, they just go back to past history of like, oh, well, I went to so-and-so for this and that and the other thing. And oh yeah, they're the police or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you explain what it is that you can do and you show up in a way that demonstrates that capability and that value, the light bulbs go off. And I can't tell you how many executives I've worked with who are like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm going to keep leveraging you for that.
Right.
And someone else can do these other things, right? Because they see it and experience it. And then it's like, it opens up this whole world. But I think a lot of HR leaders, especially as they're growing their career, maybe don't have the confidence built up yet, or they they don't know how to articulate that confidently to their clients, right? And so it holds them back. And then they just become, what I'll say, the ticket taker for whatever the business leader is looking for. So
yeah, it's so interesting, because what I'm picking up on what you're saying is, there are struggles and challenges in every field, right? And one of them is self-doubt, right? And will I fit in? And where do I stand my ground? And what are the boundaries? And I know specifically through my own experience being in HR, I definitely did what you did too. I found a way to find my voice and to set expectations about what it's the is not statement, right? This is what I do. This is not what I do. And here's how I can help you. Right. Here's what we do together. And I remember my first time I did one of those, the VP coming up and saying, I've never had a conversation like this before. Like no other HR person has ever sat down with me and said, hey, here's how I can partner with you. And I thought, what? Yeah. Like, I don't want to work without doing that. So I think one of the struggles and challenges is helping whatever role you're in to really be clear on your role, and then be able to have your soundbite strategy and the clarity on what you do. So let's talk about struggles and challenges for a minute. Like, what are they for the HR leaders right now, really wanting to make an impact on all this new opportunity that's there with the constraints we're facing? And also, like you, when I burnt out, it was after I became a mom as well. When you couldn't just, keep working all the time. You actually had a human being that was dependent on you.
Right.
So what are you seeing?
Right.
Like, what are the challenges and struggles?
Yep. And my perspective is primarily around tech, because that's where I came from and have worked with mostly in my career. But it's this notion of always on, right? And overworked. And it really comes down to, like, as I mentioned before, a physical stress, right? That shows up in physical ailments. Chronic stress is a killer, literally. And of course, that can drive to burnout, which is crisis mode at that point, and then potentially, leaving the workforce, or whether that's a leave of absence or more permanently. But I think the other struggles of HR leaders in particular, and I've heard these words out of the mouths of many of my clients, I feel unappreciated for what I do. I'm at the mercy of the business. I know I felt that a lot of the times. It was like my schedule didn't matter. It was, exec calls you up, they need help with something, you drop everything and do what needs to be done, even if it's, 9 p.m. on a Friday night. The cost of that over time is eventually we become resentful. That will result in you not doing your best work. You're going to have very low engagement, and the way you show up is not going to be great for anybody. And then I think the other, you could have a short fuse and lose your cool in a very, critical situation and damage relationships. I know there was times when I felt like I just wasn't I couldn't give 100% to anything, right? I was not showing up at work the way I wanted to. Something was always lacking, right? Home wasn't getting done. And that takes a toll on your mental health too, right? Like you just never feel like you're good enough. And I think finally, I would say HR leaders, especially when they're moved into more senior roles, I feel like they're thrown into the fire and they're not supported. it's like sink or swim. And I think part of that's because, everybody's busy, right? There's not a lot of in tech. It's kind of like everyone is kind of going their own different direction. And I think HR leaders, not just HR leaders, but new to the C-suite, do need to feel supported, right? And I think what the cost of not supporting them is failure in the role, right? And that's going to impact someone's confidence long-term and maybe their career trajectory. So how do we find more ways to support these new leaders in their senior leadership role? Because what it took at the, say, mid-career level, it's different when you move into the C-suite. And so how are we prepping and continuing to support them in those roles?
Yeah, I read a statistic, like 40% of VP and above onboarding fails. And it was one of the things that really woke me up to realize why I was successful, because I was blessed to have a coach most of my career. And so I had that safe space. And, I'm thinking now like, oh my gosh, I also had influence skills. I've been a student of influence my entire life. I remember in college, convincing the academic advisor that I wanted to change one of my classes because I thought I really wanted to learn negotiation. My point is, this has been a pull through for me. And what I know with the clients I work with and that we work with, Susan, when you have that safe space to like be human and be like, oh my God, the CEO is really pissing me off. I don't know what to do, but I know I got to get his attention. And I know what I have to say matters. And you can have that safe space to talk about it and then really kind of unpack, well, what motivates him or her? What are they worried about right now? When do they usually say yes? Like to really unpack that together, it really is a game changer for people. I've also noticed it even in my own personal life. Like when I went back from burnout, I completely changed the game on how I showed up, when I was available, who I would be working with, what times of day. And I think that one of the, if I could just offer this as we're talking, I'm thinking about that HR leader who gets that call at 9:00, right? Because I've gotten them.
Yeah.
And you take the call and you hang up and they go, thank you. And we give the power away. You're welcome. No. You know what you say instead? Here's my ninja tip for everybody. When they call you at 9 and you help them and they say, thank you, you say, it made me miss bedtime tonight with my daughter. And I know how important this is. So I'm sure you'll honor that next time you call and we can work together. Like you find a way to like call out what you gave up in that moment. Remember, you're a human being with a life too. And not to make them feel shitty, but to let them know like you matter so much. I took this call and I trust that you're going to honor that boundary and not call every night with these things. So it's like you start to broker that relationship up front. I know you and I both teach the impact playbook, right? We know how this works. So I just felt compelled to talk about that in the sense that, you can take the call, but you also have to set the stage in that call. Like that moment of thank you is your moment of power. And if you give that away, they're calling again. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, kind of comes to this authentic leadership a little bit of some self-disclosure is really important, right? Because people don't know what's going on in your world. They project their own stuff, right? And if they don't have young kids or, they may think 9:00, oh yeah, you've had dinner, things should be good, right?
Yeah.
But, unless they're a parent of a young child who goes to bed around 8-9 o'clock at night, they don't see that, right? And not to mention, even if you don't have kids, right? We all have our personal practices and preferences. And some people love to go to bed early so that they can wake up early and do their exercise before they start working out, whatever it is, or working out before they go to work. But, whatever it is, it's those boundaries and helping others to understand what else you have going on in life. But you don't have to disclose everything, but some level of that is really important because I think, especially now, as we have very blurred lines between home and work by the nature of remote work, we do have to share a little bit more so that people can be more respectful of and understand what they're interrupting. If, like you said, right, you're valued and it's important and I want to help you, but also set the expectation that I'm not going to do this every day. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think about all these struggles and challenges. I know that there are 3 shifts that you are preaching to the moon and back. These 3 shifts, when you're listening right now, I want you to lean in. If you can grab a piece of paper, do it. If not, play it back when you can, because Susan's about to give you a really great insight into 3 shifts we can make right now about solving these struggles and challenges. Like you actually know what to do, which is just so awesome. So I don't nuggets. I'm like, Building momentum, here's the foreshadowing. We're about to tell you what to do, right?
Yes, grab your piece of paper.
Grab it, right? I don't care where it is, what it is, grab it. So, Susan, how can we solve this? Like, what are the 3 shifts that need to happen to make sure that senior HR leaders, emerging HR leaders, honestly, in my opinion, anybody leading in tech, what are the 3 shifts that need to happen?
Yeah. So in my work, I found that the 3 areas, and I'll talk about it high level first and get into some specifics, but at a high level, the 3 areas that need to be addressed in order to succeed long-term is 1, excel in your role. And that means, elevating your role and the entire HR function in your organization by transforming the way you view and present yourself in the role of HR. And we've talked a little bit about that already. Excel in your leadership is the second. And that's really about kind of this idea of identifying your authentic leadership style, establishing this presence in the C-suite with your peers and maybe your new peers. And then finally, excelling in your life, right? Staying in the game, avoiding the burnout, right? And bringing your whole self to work so that you're feeling happier at work and in life. And then these shifts that kind of come out of that. And these shifts are just a couple of examples of how I apply each of these, excel in your role, your leadership, and in life. So the first one is really excelling in your role with new ways of thinking, right? So elevating the HR role, really, you got to embrace this new mindset, if you will, and have actions that support it too, right? So it's not just thinking differently, but it's the action that comes behind it, right? And we talked about this, right? You must know and believe in the value that you bring as a business leader, not just in HR, right? But as a business leader. Confidently establish and reset expectations with your new peer group, right? What your role is and isn't, and how you can contribute best, right? Because they don't know it. You've got to help them understand that. And then, there's this level of operating with some level of gravitas and staying at that senior level and kind of getting out of the weeds. And I know that's hard for HR leaders who might say, oh, I'm a solo HR person in a startup, right? I got to be in the weeds sometimes, but make sure that you do find opportunities to kind of up level for a lot of those conversations and think about it from a business perspective of, why are we doing this initiative or what's happening? So, a lot of times HR is viewed as sort of an optional or less than function in the organization because, let's face it, revenue generating functions, they're bringing in the money, right? HR is often viewed as a cost center and it is in all practical purposes. But I think showing, yes, we are a cost center, but we're worth every damn penny and showing that value that you bring, because otherwise we do become the ticket taker for the leadership team. And I've seen it where in leadership teams where they'll throw stuff in our direction that is squarely in their corner, right? It's not even something HR should be doing, but maybe it's something that's not very interesting and they want to kick it over the fence, right? And if we entertain those, this diminishes HR's value, right? And we're not taken seriously. So we train others how we want to be treated, right? And we've got to change this mindset and how we show up and how we want to be perceived by others in the C-suite. So I'll give you a quick example of a client story. So I had a client who was new to the C-suite. She was in HR. She was an HR leader. And you've got the round table of leaders going through there. She was always last on the agenda. And you know how these meetings roll out.
Yeah.
There was never time. Time always elapsed before it was her turn. And we talked about the implications of that and how that, was negative. She was showing up not in a great place because she was never getting any airtime. And the company wasn't being served. And there was all kinds of people issues that needed to be addressed. And she just was left to having one-on-ones with people. So what she did was she advocated for herself. And she basically worked with, at the time it was chief of staff who set the agenda. And she asked to be at the top of the agenda. Hey, can you put me first? I've got some really critical things that touch on and were embedded in a lot of the other things that were coming up, but never had a chance to talk about it. So she advocated for that. They tried it out, had her go first. And lo and behold, many of her allies, I would say, in the C-suite were very happy because they were actually able to finally talk as a leadership team about some really key issues that were happening in the organization that were having a real impact on all of them. And, leadership team meetings aren't just for, let's just roundtable and talk about what's happening in each of our worlds, but let's work as a team together to address real issues in the organization and move the needle. And so what she found was, with her going first, almost there was no time for anything else because there was so much pent up demand. So what they ended up doing was carving out extra time outside of that meeting to go do a deep dive on topics that would come up. And so she felt much more fulfilled. I think people really started to see the value in what she was leading in terms of a very valuable conversation that the company, I wouldn't say intentionally avoided, but they needed to have. And so that was just an example of how she spoke up because she saw a need. She wasn't feeling like HR was getting its due. And she was starting to think differently about, hey, HR is important too. Mm-hmm. and I do see that I can make a difference here if given an opportunity. And so when I think about changing the mindset, and I'll give you a few examples. So this was sort of the HR is just, we always walk in, HR is just a cost center. Well, no, HR is a key component of the business health and operating health and strategy. And Peter Drucker, right, said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yep. And that's absolutely true, right? And I think we've got to start thinking more in that way as HR leaders and bringing that to our teams. And similarly, this mindset of the old way of thinking was, HR needs to fix it. It's broken. You need to fix it. HR is not just the fix it person, right? Often we are what I'll call as the guide on the side, right? The advisor. We don't have to take ownership of every initiative. And I'll use this example, and you'll probably appreciate this, is the age-old retention. We have a retention issue. What are you doing about it, HR?
Exactly.
And whoa, wait a minute. What are we doing about it as a leadership team, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we operate best when we leverage the wisdom of the group, right? So taking opportunities to reset expectations on that. And the same holds true at home, by the way, with parenting, right? And not feeling like we have to fix everything, right? Enabling our kids and teaching our kids to become more independent thinkers and ultimately adults, right? Teaching them to fish, setting those expectations with them and providing guidance and it could also show up with our partner too, and how we can't be the do-it-all person, right? We have to figure out how we divide and conquer, right? Together. So, and then the last example I'll give you in terms of ways of thinking is this idea of, and I saw this in an article and I loved it so much. We always talk about HR having a seat at the table. And that was kind of the mantra for many, many years. And yes, that's important. But how about this mindset? Having a voice in the room. You have earned the seat at the table. And now it is your duty and responsibility to speak up when the time calls for it.
Okay, hold on. You got to do it again. Do it again. So good. So freaking good. Okay. Seat at the table is a given that comes with the title, right? Forget that.
That's right.
What you're talking about is the voice in the room. So go again.
You've earned that seat at the table already. You're there. It's time to speak up. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm guilty of this too. I sat in the room and listened. And I learned a lot by listening. But man, I had things to say that weren't said. And then the worst part about it is someone later on says what you should have said and they get the credit for it. And It's like, oh, brilliant, right? But you knew it all along. So, you've earned that seat, leverage that, and really speak up when the time calls for it, because you're doing a disservice to your organization when you're not. Mm-hmm. So, own that. And, you didn't get to this level of role by chance, right? You've earned it. You need to speak up. And, I think the more we embrace this new way of thinking of HR, it's a way of kind of reconnecting, right? And communicating with gravitas will only serve our organizations better than, just kind of taking the back seat or kind of being the person on the outside looking in.
This is gold. What you've said, there's so many things I can unpack, and we would be here for 7 hours, I think. What I want to say is, listen again, rewind and listen again, because the things that you're talking about, not only is it important for the HR professional to be hearing this, I fundamentally and firmly believe that all leaders need to know this, right? And the thing that I believe is what I know to be true is that leaders that don't have the people or the business skills, these technical experts who we love, they're amazing, but they are not developed. They are not given the opportunities to enhance or really develop these people and business skills. They're a liability to the company. The fastest way to learn the people and business skills, it's go talk to your HR partner. I swear to you. You want to learn fast? You can go to every class in the book. Yes, right? Go sit down with your HR business partner on a regular basis and say, what are your thoughts? What ideas do you have? How could we make this better? Because guess what? They don't know how to write the code. You do. But you know what they know? People in business. You may not. So it's like this unspoken solution when you have an HR business partner, CHRO, entry level, rep that actually understands people in business. You pair them up with a great technical expert and imagine the impact, the ripple effect. What could be possible if your business and people skills went up as high as your technical skills? Guess what happens? Nirvana. I mean, I'm kidding, but seriously, all of those employee relations issues, retention issues, no engagement. I mean, all of the things, reuse, bad code, all of it, you can actually, by partnering with an HR business partner who stands with their voice, knows what they're doing, and actually allows the conversations to happen because they're confident in themselves, right? To use your word, gravitas. And they bring that forward. I mean, that's a magic combo that you can't make that up. So I think I'm just really compelled right now to say, whether you're an HR leader listening and being inspired, which is exactly what's supposed to be happening right now, or you're that business leader who hasn't really tapped into the untapped amazingness, which is your HR team. Right now, your double dog dare, pick up the phone. Hey, I just listened to this episode. I really don't think I've appreciated you enough. I had no idea all these things were going on. Or, hey, in our next meeting, I'd like you to go first. Or, hey, what else do you think we need to do? Just to be curious and to ask. Leaders who are listening right now who aren't in HR, you have an obligation to bring your HR person into this conversation too. I double dog dare you. I think it's critical. And I think what Susan is saying matters so much for you, not only to walk in the shoes of the HR professional who's helping you run your business, but also, any woman as well, because, Susan talked on two levels here, females in tech and HR. So I need to take a pause for a minute because I'm just fired up about this. But I think the missing piece that is just like screaming at me right now is go ask your HR person how they're doing, what ideas they have, right? And thank them. Be grateful for whatever they've done, because you know what? They need it right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that is a great call out. And even if you're that leader who maybe isn't sure that your HR person is capable, challenge them, right? And invite them to show you what they're capable of. And I think you would be surprised potentially around how they'll rise to the occasion. I think a lot of HR leaders do hold back, and if they're invited to have that kind of dialogue and conversation, I think they would welcome it with open arms and be very pleased that you're even asking. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean it wholeheartedly. So we've talked about a lot. We've talked about the challenges, the implications. We've looked at the struggles. We've also looked at the shifts. Excel in your role, excel in your leadership, excel in your life. And a lot of that is mindset as well as courage, boldness, gravitas. I would love if you could just tell me, we have this playlist and we always put songs on there either to inspire us, lift our energy, also for reflection, right? Sometimes we need to just pause and get ourselves more grounded. So on this topic, what's a song that comes to mind, Susan, that could really, remind us, if we never remember the words we just said, but that song reminds us, to excel in our role, excel in our leadership, excel in our life. What song does that for you?
There's a couple that come to mind, and I was kind of thinking about this earlier. And so there's a few. So one, I'll say I'm Still Standing by Elton John.
Yep. I'm still standing.
Yeah. And then the other one is Brave by Sarah Bareilles.
Oh, yeah.
And I really love that one because I think it just really both, show that, we have this within us and we can do great things. But those are just, two songs that just good energy, really bring you back to let's move through this. And then the last one, I couldn't resist it because I love the high energy songs that kind of get me into but it's this Walking on Sunshine, which is perfect for today. It's kind of a rainy day today, but Walking on Sunshine is just kind of opens my mind and my heart to just, hey, let's do this, right? And it's just good feeling, good energy.
I actually have a mega mix in my head right now. I've got, I'm still standing. I want to see you be brave. Walking on sun. I'm like, Woo! I'm going to date myself, but that would be a good mixtape. I'm just saying.
It would be a good mixtape.
Here's the thing. I want everyone to notice something right now. I asked Susan for a song. She gave us 3. So there's the power in like owning your answer to the question and speaking your truth, right? And then being yourself. So she could have picked one, but Susan had 3 and Susan gave all 3 and I just mega mixed them. So imagine a world where you share everything you have to say and you actually bring the value forward that your voice can. And then so I go back to your message about the voice. The seat at the table, you got it. Bring in your voice. And if someone says, what's one song and you got 3, give them 3. Susan, thank you for modeling that. Like, that's so important for people to recognize. Like, don't just give the minimum that's asked. If you've got more, let it roar. It's so cool. You just did that. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay. So, hey,
we make up our own rules, right?
Right. Of course, I'm going to ask how people can find you. We'll link to it, of course. I mean, like I said, we do work together. You have your own business as well. Yeah. But for people the fastest way to get to you, is that LinkedIn? Is it an email? Is it your website? Tell people how to find you if they got to have more right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Visit me at my website. It's www.hrleaderscoach.com. And you can find out all about me, my programs, what I do. And you can certainly reach me through there.
So cool. And it's easy. hrleaderscoach.com. It's not hard to figure out. hrleaderscoach.com.
Hopefully it's pretty easy to spell. Yeah.
It's really easy to spell. And I actually feel lighter because this topic matters so much to me. I think I was carrying the weight of the implications of the world that we're in right now. And as you've shared these tips and these insights, we've told some stories, we brought some songs in. I am walking on sunshine, truthfully, right now with what's possible when this message gets to those that it needs to be received by. So whether it's the HR professional, right, or their partner in business, like I will end with the double dog dare, Susan, and perhaps you want to add to it. But the double dog dare, leaders in tech, go make a phone call, make a Zoom call, stop by if you're in the same office, ask your HR person how they're doing, thank them for what they've done, and then invite them to help you solve a problem you're facing right now, and watch what happens.
HR leaders, this is your moment to step up to the plate and shine. You're being invited in. Absolutely own it with all of your being. You know what you need to do. Go and just be that counterpart to your business leaders and just really help them. You're providing a service. You're needed. You are, and especially right now, you're so needed in these organizations. No one really knows what to do, and so the more you can partner with your business colleagues to come up with solutions together, the better everyone's going to be. So you're not alone, but definitely own and take on this challenge.
I don't have a mic to drop, but I got a pen. Boom! There it is.
There you go.
Make it a great day, everyone. Lean into your awesomeness. Go partner up with someone and, find your voice, give your 3 songs. Know that you're loved, you're needed, you are appreciated, and you're important. And make it a great day. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, everybody, make it a great day.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Dury. Head on over to wherever you find your other favorite podcasts and subscribe to Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Dury. Leave a review with some of that 5-star love. And let's keep it real. There's a reason why you're listening to this. If you don't get the support you need and start making changes in your life and work as a leader in tech, you can expect regret and burnout in the near future. Lisa and the team at RLD Group have been in your shoes, sat in those meetings, and experienced everything you can imagine as a leader in tech. They can help you get kick-ass results at work without burning out, so you can be present for the moments that matter to you and your loved ones. Take your first step by visiting rldgroupllc.com. RLD Group helps develop technical experts lacking people leadership skills from being a company's biggest liability into their greatest asset. Find out more at rldgroupllc.com. Thanks again for listening. Catch you next time on Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Dury, powered by RLD Group, as we help you reboot your leadership drive.